I remember when I was a lot younger, because I have a tendency, one could say I have sort of rougher edges, if you will. And I used to think, I would see women that were really loving and nurturing, and they'd be like, oh, okay, and really soft and sweet. And I thought, I must not be loving, or I must not be nurturing because I don't act like that. And what was a great, important lesson for me is I am very loving and I am very nurturing, but I just do it with my own language. And so sometimes we see other people doing things or contributing, and you say, well, maybe I can't do that because I don't speak that language. And the fact of the matter is, we all certainly can, as long as we're comfortable with knowing that we might just have a different language.
Hey everyone, I'm Andy Petronic, the co-founder of the Whole Life Challenge, and welcome to episode 163 of the Breaking Ordinary podcast. This is a show about raising the bar, improving your life, transforming your health, fitness, and well-being, and shattering the status quo. My guests are people who have found the inner strength and confidence to lead from the front, to stand out, to be different, and to truly make a difference in the world of health, fitness, and well-being. Their stories will astound, inspire, and inform, and will help generate ideas that spring you into action. Yes, we are all about action here on the Breaking Ordinary podcast. I'm Andy Petronic. Well, you already know that. God, you know what? I want to just start with a little bit about learning. Something that I'm very aware of today is how I've been on this quest for learning for years, for decades, probably since, my grandfather kind of beat it into my head as a kid, not literally beat it into my head, but over and over again, talked to me about how my education and my knowledge was something no one can ever take away. And the interesting thing, though, is as I think back to over the last 25 years of growth and personal development and courses and certifications I've taken, I take very little time, or I have taken very little time in the past to consider how I take those things I'm learning and apply them to my life. It's one thing to learn them, and it's another thing to apply them in your life. And very often I find myself learning for the sake of learning, like more is better, more podcasts are better, more courses are better, more certifications are better, when I haven't squeezed the juice out of what I've gotten. And I'm not actually doing but as much as I could with the information I already have. So one of the things that I do now when I read or when I listen is I take notes, and then I go back and I read the notes. Every day I write about the things I'm learning. And then there are days that I declare them. I declare them on Instagram. I use Instagram a lot, by the way. If you haven't checked out my Instagram feed, I'm at Andy Petronic. If you're interested, I use my story. I put up quotes. I put up photographs of things that I feel are helping me declare. They're helping me define certainty for myself. And very often they're things that other people aspire to. They're, So it helps me because it's public, and going on the hook for things publicly gives me a requirement to have a certain level of confidence in myself. So whether that means it's a video or it's a quotation that I have worked on and written and pared down so that it's in a bite-sizable, amount that'll fit on an Instagram photograph. It is, I'm on the hook for it, right? Because it's public. So I just throw that out there as a piece for you to consider trying on. How are you using the tools and the learning that you're getting? Are you actually using them? Are you taking what you're learning and either declaring something new for your life or doing something different as a result? And, yeah. Well, listen, today I'm really excited about the conversation. I'm talking with Gabrielle Reece. And if you know anything about professional surfing, big wave surfing, her husband really well. Gabby is a celebrity of her own. She's a TV personality. She's a New York Times best-selling author. She's a model. She's a wife. She's a mother. She's 6'3". She's a former professional beach volleyball player. She was Nike's first female spokeswoman. She's her husband's name, who I alluded to before, is Laird Hamilton, big wave surfer. And man, she's a force. I went out to, she runs a company and a program now called XPT. And I went out to their house in Malibu and went through a day-long experience with XPT. And it was phenomenal. I mean, we went through a series of breathing exercises. We did a series of work in ice baths and then saunas for the hot cold therapy. And then we did a bunch of drills in the pool where we were using dumbbells and swimming and carrying them and things I never really thought about doing with dumbbells in a pool before. We talk about it in the podcast. And it was a really, really eye-opening experience and things that I am committed to continuing. You know, I play around with. I won't say I'm committed to cold showers, but I'm committed to at certain times of the year, cold showers. And I would like to add a ice bath to my tools of tricks here at my home, but I haven't done that yet. Let's see a little bit more about Gabby. She turned pro she was in the Olympics in 1999, 2000. Beach volleyball world tour in 1997. I'm just grabbing things from her bio that stand out to me. She's a complete stud, and she's incredibly feminine, meaning like she's a powerful woman in her own right and a mom, and very, very much lives into that, and has a very different way about how she does what she does. But make no mistake, she is freaking tough. In the podcast, I mean, it was funny because we had trouble getting it scheduled because the Malibu fires happened, and they live right in the heart of the Malibu fires. In fact, the day I was supposed to go up there, Laird's Instagram was a video of him battling the fires near his house, helping his neighbors, helping save his own house, and then driving through what looked like a complete inferno out of there. So we had a little bit of trouble getting it scheduled, but we did. We talked about his training. We talk about Gabby's training. We talk about the importance of self-work and what can be construed as selfish acts, but they're really not selfish because you need you to take care of the rest of the people that you love in your life. We talk about... being a coach. We talk about, she shares a really cool mental imagery for how she teaches people how to breathe, starting in the diaphragm, moving up the spine, moving up into the upper lungs. And it's a really cool, she kind of takes us through it. I'm actually doing it while she's talking about it during the podcast. And anyway, I'm just going to bring her in because there's no sense in delaying this. And you're going to really love this. You're going to love the conversation, and you're going to love Gabby. And check out the show notes. They're available at wholelifechallenge.com/podcast. And as I always say, you're going to hear a commercial for this later on. But God, if you're getting something out of this podcast, share something about it. Tell people about it. It's the only way I can continue to get great guests like Gabby Reece to come on the show. So that's it. Let's bring her in. 3, 2, 1. Here we go. Gabby Reece, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
I just, I'm grateful that we could finally make this happen. It's been, we've been going back and forth. I don't know if you've been going back and forth, but I've been going back and forth with your people for a few months. Yeah.
Well, sometimes, it's just parts of your life are busier. And I think it's also, one thing I have learned is, is putting things in a location that you can do a good job and honor them. And when you don't think you can, it's okay to say, I can't do that right now.
Right.
And so sometimes I'll push things off because I know I'm just there's, I'm getting pulled in too many directions. So that took me a long time to learn, but here we are.
Well, I just actually remembered this. The time that we were supposed to get together was on the Monday during the fires. And, life kind of gets in the way of things, right? There was no chance I was coming to Malibu on that Monday.
That's right. Of course. Listen, humans are funny, right? Like we always say, oh, I know I'm not in control and I'm here making plans, but we still do. And then we're surprised somehow when we get the real moments where we're like, oh yeah, that's right. I can't just plan it, through my whole life. So, that's right. I forgot that was when we were supposed to do it. Pretty funny. Yeah,
and I think on that same day I saw Laird's post on Instagram with him driving through an inferno in his truck and saving the house. Of course, he's Laird Hamilton. What else would he do? He save the house and then save anybody else that needs saving and then drive through the inferno.
Yeah, that would be sort of a trait of Laird and people like Laird, where if they can help and contribute. Laird always says that's what you do, right? So he's always amazed when people will say to him, really that because we had some floods in April in Kauai and
right. I saw that too. Yeah.
Laird's like, it's amazing now where when you conduct yourself probably the way you're supposed to, especially if you have the skill set, that has become special behavior versus, people doing what they're supposed to do.
It's always interesting because, when I was a Marine, it would always strike me as odd to be called a hero or to be, to be honored. Like, it was just odd. I felt like this is weird. I didn't do anything. I'm just doing what I'm supposed to do, what I'm capable of doing. So I totally relate to that. Like, it's a very odd thing. That's what you are supposed to do. Of course.
You are. And listen, I think when people go above and beyond and the notion of service, I do think it's, even if they sort of have the clarity and humility not to receive it as a big deal, I think there's nothing wrong with the people around them supporting that behavior because, it's like having kids. I certainly know that I communicate to my kids when I feel like something's happening that shouldn't be happening. But I also try to remember when they're doing things sort of above and beyond, or you see them making an effort in a new way to go, let's recognize that. So even if the person doesn't receive it as a big deal, I think it's nice if people around those individuals go, hey, that's really appreciated.
Yes, I do too. But I relate to both sides of that because with my son, we go probably sometimes over the top in congratulating him for the things that he does, awesome goal. And, when he was 4, it was awesome goal. And he could barely knew which direction to run for the goal.
That's our modern day parenting too, right?
Yes.
I think that's always the dance too.
Yeah. Cause I think there are things that my parents would or would not have done 40 years ago that would have they would have landed in jail had they, been parenting that way now,
Yeah. And I think, how do we raise humans where, you're doing this for yourself. You're not doing this for me or for likes on a post. If you can still stay in touch with that, you're doing it really for yourself, even if you're 4 years old, that's pretty powerful. Because at the end of the day, right, you're the one who's got to live that life. So I think as a parent, if we can sort of navigate that's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the time that I saw you before the time I was supposed to see you was when you were practically drowning me with weights as I tried to swim across the pool.
Don't phrase it like that.
Well, when you give somebody a set of dumbbells and you stick them in the deep end, and I mean, look, I'm just totally kidding, but it's a little disconcerting. It's a little weird. Like, who does that? It's not normal.
You came up here. I didn't come to your house.
Yeah, that's true. I came for it.
I'm not saying like you knew the job was dangerous when you took it. I think. Listen, the pool is interesting when you give people who are going into an environment where there's no air and now you're giving them weight or asking them to work. but the upside is once you can get them to dial into what it is that the pool is, I think if people have access to it, it's a tool that they can use for so many different parts of life. So yeah, there's the training and there's the no impact and there's being, training in compression and being in a nice environment of water, being outside. But then there's all of the emotional and mental stuff that goes along with the pool, because you are sort of in this environment that's really straightforward, right? It's not picking on you. There just is no air under the water. So I think that for me actually ends up being the most interesting part of the pool training is, so wait a second, in everything in my life, if I try harder, I try to make it happen. And in this environment, in fact, if I have that attitude, I burn so much oxygen just to house that attitude that I can't complete the intended goal or task. So now I have to go inside of myself and find out how to genuinely relax so I can complete the task. And then, it's like the military. What do the guys say? Slow is smooth and smooth is fast, right? So I think there's something to that the pool brings. So, I mean, hopefully it was a positive experience for you.
It's totally. No. I'm completely kidding. It was an incredible experience. I mean, the last time I had done anything like that was when I went through dive school when I was in the Navy, in the pre-Marines. Yeah. And, there was a thing that they used to call, I think they called it, it wasn't called drown proofing. It was called, God dang, I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, you had to swim in the deep end. You had twin sets of steel tanks on your back, twin 72s they're called. And you're swimming down around the bottom with your dive buddy, and you're not allowed to look up. And it's about a 15-foot deep pool, and you're swimming in these circles like a school of fish, just swimming and swimming and swimming. And you're not allowed to look anywhere other than down. And the instructors are all hovering above like sharks, and they come down, and at any moment they're allowed to do anything they want with one breath of air to F you, just to F your world. And sometimes they would swim above you as you're and watching your bubbles, and they'd be turning off the regulator and turning it down until you go, they watch the bubbles, you're almost done fully exhaling, and then they'd turn at the last turn and you'd go, there's nothing. You can't inhale, you can't do anything, and your eyes would bug out, and they're testing your ability to remain composed underwater and not panic and not go to the safety diver and grab a breath of air, or go to your buddy and grab a breath of air.
Well, that reaction, right? Even the reaction to that is probably 10% of your air. And we do have to do so many things that are uncomfortable in life, but sometimes I feel like if we can put ourselves in a healthful, uncomfortable environment, I don't want to say that's not emotional, but like, for example, when you're a kid, maybe you create a girl, like teenage girls, right? I was a teenage girl. Like, you create drama because you're like, I want to see what that's like, and I want to experience that tension. But inevitably, it's sort of, probably not the best idea. And like, okay, I could say, well, maybe I'm bored as a person. And so when Laird gets home today, I'm going to create something just for sort of my emotional entertainment. And then you start to hopefully go, well, okay, what are the things I can place myself into that I can expand kind of some of my emotional palette a little bit, that's still within the rules of like, positive play or something like that, where it's still all pretty good. So I think the pool really does, more so than other physical training. I think it really provides that. Yeah,
well, I mean, there's an element, like you said, of, it's kind of like gravity. Gravity when you're a little kid and you're learning how to walk is the similar experience. Like, there's no wrong, there's no right. It's just you get off balance and boom, you're on your face.
Yeah,
and the
it's
pool,
very straightforward.
Yeah, it's very, very simple. I had never really thought of that before, but it gets very clear what works and what doesn't work very quickly.
Yep, and it's never personal.
Yeah. And it's really cool. It's really cool to do that training. I wish I had a pool in my backyard where I could actually incorporate it into my life, because it would be very valuable. I mean, I could go to the beach, but I'm not bringing my kettlebells and dumbbells to the beach with me. Is that something that you make a part of your training each week? I mean, I know you're teaching it all the time. How do you incorporate that into your daily routine?
Well, when we're in Hawaii at the moment, we don't actually, I'm in California right now, but typically in the winters we're in Hawaii and we don't, we're in the midst of building a pool for training. So we sort of take that time off, and then Laird's in his season for big waves. So he's actually not doing too much other types of training, because he'll go, let's say 5 hours in the morning and go foiling or what have you. And so he's always working on his breathing and his overall recovery, heat and ice during that time of the year. Mm-hmm. And he's really smart about that. So typically it's sort of like April through November, 3 days a week. Unless we have, some other work going on, we'll incorporate that training into our own regimen. How
do you do it though? Like if you don't have a pool, you're like, what do you? You
mean like a civilian that doesn't have a pool?
Yeah.
I think if you had access to 3 feet of water, which, like a YMCA, I think there are drills. Obviously, they're not going to really be thrilled if you drag some dumbbells into their pool. Right. But there are some, extended types of drills you can do in 3 feet of water. And so I think it's sort of like once people learn how to use it as a tool, there are ways to modify it. But there's sort of nothing, the weight does create this very interesting element that you can't replicate without it. I mean, that's just the way it is.
Right. What does it look like to incorporate some of the things that you teach? Like you said, Laird is smart about the way he does his, he'll go train for 5 hours, not trained, he'll surf. He's surfing, but I guess he is training perhaps. I'm not sure exactly. What is that? What do you mean by that?
When you're performing at that level, because you're talking about somebody who's moving at a clip, Laird doesn't do it at a real, he doesn't moderate his pace when he's surfing or foiling. Laird's going. So if he's there for 5 hours, chances are he's probably working.
Right.
So he's very smart about understanding if I want to perform continuously at this level, at this pace, then when I hit land and I eat, my next thing I need to be concentrating on, once he sort of navigates life stuff. So is it kids? Is it me? Is it a work call? Is it an interview? Whatever. He is very diligent with his sort of recovery practice. You hear this all the time about training and just how important the recovery arm is to it. And I actually think as you get deeper into a training life, so years, let's say, and hopefully you have mentors around you that are really teaching you, new ideas, is if you dial in your food pretty well and you navigate some level of breathing or meditation, that you start to know pretty quickly that recovery is really important and important to feeding that performance at that level. So I think Laird is, he's just one of the most disciplined people I've ever seen. He doesn't chinch on his recovery. Most of us would, because it's sort of like the extra, it's the bonus, it's the homework. Mm-hmm. He doesn't, because he's so committed to the high performance that he's as committed to the recovery. And maybe that also is part of something, because what he does is dangerous. So maybe he's smart enough to go, well, this is actually connected to some level of my safety.
Right. It's not just a kettlebell swing workout that he's performing.
Yeah, or I hurt my back. It's like, right. So he's so linked to this idea of a peak performance. It's interesting when you're in a sport. I had a different kind of sport, obviously, with volleyball, where it's like it's in the same measured square, the height's the same net, you can bring it anywhere. When you're dealing with an athlete, an elements athlete, where they have time is like a different thing, and conditions are precious. And so Laird understands that when he gets the chance, not only does he need to be ready, but he needs to go at the highest level of performance that he can in that moment. And a lot of athletes, like, they have seasons, okay, so we work up, so we want to be peak performance in playoffs or finals, Super Bowls, championships, whatever. Athletes like this, element athletes, they almost have to figure out how can they be peak performance at a moment's notice, more like a firefighter. And the consequences are great. They're greater than losing. So it's just an interesting person, different type of athlete to live with.
Yeah, that's, I never really thought about that either. I mean, I guess it's similar to a firefighter. It's probably similar to a combat, a soldier, military. Yep. Yeah, it's go time, and there's no question that you have to bring it in that moment.
Well, that's it. And I think nobody understands that except for those types of people.
Yep.
I understand that, listen, if something happens, I would like to think, and I've been in a few situations, that I would keep my cool and try to do the right thing. And I try to do that in my relationships. But these types of people, you've met them, if it's military, because it's not only, I kept my cool. It's how do I perform at that highest level using all of my faculties to the best of my ability, to the best of their ability. And it's exhausting, right? It could be once in a while, like once every 5 years, if something really heavy happens to me, I have a moment. I go, okay, I can do the right thing. But you're talking about people who are doing this year after year, if you're lucky, if you're a surfer day after day, which is very unusual for those types of conditions. So it's a very different type of person where they're aggressive and they go get it. And yet the patience is sort of like off the chart. And then their ability to, all the little details all the time. Right. Because that's really what makes the difference, right? Like the difference between being prepared or unsafe, or accomplishing something or rescuing somebody or your equipment. Like it's about the patience to deal with those little details all the time, including like recovery. And for a guy like Laird, it's also the patience to wait for the conditions. Military guys have something else. It's almost like you're waiting for something you hope doesn't happen.
Right.
But it will. And for guys like Laird or a rock climber or something, it's like, they want it to happen.
Right.
And so there's a different, little bit of obviously a differentiating point. So it's interesting. I think people only see the big stuff. Like they see like the guy going up the face of the mountain or the giant wave, but they don't actually understand that in some ways the most fatiguing, difficult things is the stuff that we certainly we never see. And that's even hard to probably put into words. It's
the long game that puts you, it's the foundation, it's the stuff, it's the bottom of the iceberg,
over and over and over and over again. And, because the love, the depth of the love, of the commitment, of the mission, the constant mission, I think if you took any one of those types of athletes, male or female, the line to that they're tethered to their real reason pretty deeply.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just having a conversation with somebody about podcasting, and there's some statistic where the average podcast that gets launched in iTunes has like 6 episodes total. Like it's this shiny new thing, and people want to go do it, and they get like they line up like 5 or 6 of their friends, and they have talks with 5 or 6 of their friends, and then it's like, okay, now I got to do something else. Like it's actually hard. It's actually like a lot of fucking work to continue. And you have to keep expanding. Yeah, right.
You're not learning and expanding and understanding sort of new areas to talk about or new questions. You're just going to be traveling over the same, topics over and over. So, it's even like a guy, how does Joe Rogan tape 2 and 3 podcasts?
It's amazing.
For the last how many years? And what you realize is, well, first of all, he's doing some very genius things, right? He's growing off of his guests. So he's expanding his own, framework, but he's sort of doing some work, and you see that you go, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
So to your point, everybody a lot of people, I've been, with Laird for 23 years, and people will say, like, other guys will be like, oh God, Laird has the life and I want to be Laird. And be fun. Not, I want to be Laird, but I'd like to, that would be amazing, right? Like I can go surf for a living and all that and stuff. And yes, there's some real, the real gift to Laird is that he gets to do what he loves to do for a living, for sure. However, I always think to myself, most people couldn't.
Right.
They couldn't do that foundation stuff. They couldn't take the pain. They couldn't take how long the disproportionate amount of time it's actually not happening to when it is happening.
Right.
And so I think we get romantic notions about podcasts or other things, but we don't always fully understand. Like, the work is happening more times than just the shiny stuff.
Right. Right. Totally.
And that's true to life, right? That's true to life in so many things. But I also believe that when you can kind of find the art, it's like a relationship, right? So how do you find the art in kind of some of the everyday stuff? And I think once you can tap into the beauty of that and how that supports some of the more magical or shiny elements, I think then you get into a harmony with that is beautiful and interesting, but it's more quiet. And I think it's for you. It's not something you go to somebody like, today was like the 9,000th time I made my bed and the way that I put the corner of the sheet. No, that's just something for you to notice for yourself. And that's kind of probably the art of everyday living, I would think.
Hey, y'all, quick interruption. As you heard me say earlier in the introduction to this podcast, if you get something out of this conversation, if you're hearing something that Gabby said, or you do hear something that Gabby says, or I say later on in this conversation, please do me a favor and do the world a favor and share it. Share it in social media. Put a review up in iTunes. You can go to bit.ly/breakingordinary. It will open up in iTunes and it'll give you a spot in there to write something about the podcast. I can only continue to bring you great guests by increasing the number of people that know about this podcast, increasing the number of people that download it. So you're really doing a service to the rest of the world, especially if it's bringing you value. So that's it. Let's get back to the conversation, and we'll see you. Yeah, you mentioned relationships. They are work, man. I mean, like, big time fucking work. Like, there is no coincidence. Anyone that's been married for 10 plus years, it's not just this romantic thing that you might see on Instagram or Facebook. Doing the fucking work in a relationship. I keep cursing because when I get emotional about something, I keep throwing in F-bombs, but I'm sorry.
Well, it's one of my favorite words.
Okay.
When I became a parent, I somehow learned to really appreciate that word, even if it was privately, more than any other.
Yes, totally. I relate to that.
It's just... I will say this, though, because I've had people ask me, like, oh, what's the secret? And I've always said, hey, Laird and I have mutual respect. I think there's reverence. I think we're both sort of separately trying to grow, and that kind of complements weaving in and out of each other's lives. But I also will say this, because I think it's important not to make people feel bad, is we started with a lot of chemistry. Right. And I don't mean just physical chemistry. We started as, like, I have girlfriends I have chemistry with. Like, there's just certain people you meet and, like, you flow and you're drawn to each other, and it doesn't even mean in a sexual way, obviously. It's like you just have chemistry. Mm-hmm. And so I think sometimes there's these invisible parts that until you go a little deeper into the relationship, you don't really understand how big is that chemistry, how expansive is that chemistry? Is the chemistry only rooted in your sexual attraction? Does it expand beyond that, just as two human spirits, and things like that? So I think that is an important part, and that is so very personal to each couple or, friends or what have you. But I think actually the real work comes from trying to first navigate your own self, your own happiness, your own voice. And then how do you find a way to express that within this sort of what can be at times feel confining, right? Like a relationship or a family sometimes feels confining just by some of the you've got to hit the marks, right? Like dinner has to get made and kids have to get places and they're trying to have a sex life and then work is happening and bills are getting paid. And so how do you expand as an individual creatively, emotionally, then do that as a couple and then maybe try to do it as a family? I don't know. I think there's people who do that very well. I'm always like, if I can get my kids connected to themselves and functioning out of the house, I'll be like, okay, that's an accomplishment. The artistry, I'm sometimes always navigating that in those parameters. But I think sometimes we'll work at the relationship or we'll work at these other things, but I still always think that the real work we're responsible for with ourselves, because then all of a sudden, if I can navigate myself, almost regardless of what mood Laird's in or what Laird's going through, I can try to still bring my best self, which somehow really makes the relationship easier, right? I don't take it personal. I don't go down every rabbit hole with him. I'm more supportive of his, dreams and hopes. But I think being a human being is work, and and also in the way that we're trying to live, because in ways we're never tired enough. We do have too many distractions, and I think there's so many things that we do each day that are unnatural to us, and so we're always battling these feelings like, oh, I feel anxious, oh, I feel restless, oh, I need to work out. Before, no one was like, oh, I need to work out. You were working out for a living, like right. You had to walk places, so we have all these things that we're navigating that maybe aren't in complete harmony with our biology, and I think just even knowing that, you go, oh, okay, and this makes sense why this is a struggle for me. How do I navigate this in the world that I have chosen to live in? And once you get into that rhythm, I think it makes a lot of things easier, for sure.
Well, I think you touched on something. You didn't just touch on it. You were talking about something, your commitment to yourself and how, if you don't work on this thing that's you, you're constantly at the, you're constantly being wagged by the dog of your life, and you're at the mercy of the way other people. You're constantly doing other people's work, or constantly at the beck and call of other people's emotions, or constantly, you have no groundedness, you have no centeredness, and
no.
And you're right. I mean, that's really the foundation of the work, is knowing yourself and understanding yourself and taking care of this thing, Well, and also, how do I not keep in my same story, like, oh, this is who I am. I have a friend we always talk about, you hear a lot of people maybe who in psychology talk about, identity and individuality, right? Mm-hmm. And so we have these stories. I've had some very strong stories in my past. I was a professional athlete, whatever. How do I stay within my individual self? How do I keep learning and growing? Because everybody around me is going to want to define me. Oh, even my kids, like, oh, my mom is XYZ. Well, talk about cursing. It's like, well, maybe fuck you. Maybe I am that. Maybe I'm not. Maybe I was that, and maybe based on some stuff that went down, I added a little stuff, tools, or I tried to tell a different story about myself or approach it differently because it wasn't working. So I think that that's even the hardest thing, is to get away from those identities and just try to keep connected to your individual self, and also keep that story growing and expanding simultaneously to being someone's partner, husband or wife, or boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever, and parent,
and professional person with a title, whatever that is, I feel like then you start getting into an essence of something that it can be pretty dynamic and pretty liberating if you can keep plugging into that, and your partner will look at you and be like, wow, this person is, they're still trying to be better and grow, and I admire and I respect that. And if you're trying to be your best self and your kindest self in your relationship, of course with boundaries, I think that has a really powerful impact on your environment. You know, I used this woman, Byron Katie, you know, it's like, I'm always, me as a parent, right? I'm trying to control my environment. I'm like, oh, wait a second. If I can change myself or my reactions, it is powerful to see what can happen around you. Does it happen as quick as you want? Probably not, but it does really work.
She wrote, one of her books is called The Work, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It's fantastic.
Yeah. I think once, and I was just talking to a friend of mine who's actually friends with her, and we were talking about this Gillette ad. I don't know if you saw this.
I have. Yeah, I totally have. Yeah. It's drumming up a lot of responses, a lot of reactions, a lot of emotions. Yeah.
And as a woman, I was kind of like, okay, I don't know what the big deal is. Mm-hmm. You know, like I don't, like if I'm a marketing guy and the modern day message is, hey, we have to transcend this behavior. And in this case, it's, you know, macho, toxic masculinity or whatever the hell they want to call it. So now they want to talk about, hey, don't behave like that. And now they're mad about that too. Right. So I find it interesting so my point was, I was like, I'm, you know, at some points, and I have 3 daughters and they're growing up in this world. I'm like, it's total insanity. And because we also have a 24-hour news beast, no one's really curating thoughtful content. Okay. Right. The worst was the news, right? So we'd be like in the morning, the evening news, that was all sensationalized, but it was still a sort of recycle from the morning. Okay. But you had newspapers that came out once a day. So people had to thoughtfully sort of at least construct something, whether it was true, completely truthful or not. Now we just have these beasts that we've got to feed. Yep. And so, you know, you've got these, you know, on staff 20-year-old writers that are like just whipping it together. And I said to him, you know, for me sometimes, and I'm a little bit older, it frustrates me. And he goes, it's all an experiment, you know, like the whole thing. And yes. And you go, yes, but the collateral damage to certain generations and all this. And he goes, okay, Civil War, Holocaust, World Wars. He goes, right. These are still all experiments, and check out the collateral damage, right? We're talking about, you know, depression and all these things that, you know, my kids are going to having to, you know, deal with and fend off and figure out how to deal with social media and all these things. And so just when I start to bite into like, how is this happening? I am reminded by people also maybe in certain ways smarter than me, like, this is an experiment. So how do I want to contribute to this experiment? Which way can I do that positively in a real reflection of who I am today? And you know, the rest you have to just let other people, they're doing their story.
Well, I think you're right. You know, the speed at which the world is obsessed by information and news, and I mean, even just blog articles, and look at the number of podcasts there are now. Like, I mean, people just they're ravaging for more information. And I always tell people, if I sat you know, people that don't know what to do, they're like, I don't know what to do to lose weight. Let's say 10 pounds or something. If I stuck you on a deserted island with no resources and no websites and no newspapers, and you had to lose 10 pounds, you could eat whatever you wanted, you'd figure out a way to do it. I guarantee you know enough to be able to do that. Yeah. And, you know, like it's not an information problem that we have. And I think slowing down, I think is one of the things that, you know, I wanted to get kind of pull back to is meditation and breathing.
Yep.
How valuable that is, because it creates space from the insanity that's going around, that's swirling around us at all times.
Yeah. It's so true. And I would like to start that top of that conversation with, I'm the worst person, or second worst, to want to sit and meditate and do all these things. Mm-hmm. But what I have learned is, especially through the breathing, is I've actually learned how to use that as a tool all day long to help me stay further back from the edge of that cliff. So I think it's really important when we talk about this, that people go, I don't have time for that. It's like, okay, you don't. And maybe when you do, you can do a 10 or 15 minute session, because that would be interesting to go a little deeper. But if you don't, if you can at least learn how to breathe correctly, you give yourself percentages. That's what I love about the pool, right? 2%, who cares? Oh no, 2% is a lot.
Right.
Right. Sweet little incremental percentages to back you off that cliff. And you can see it. You can feel like, oh, all of a sudden my breath has moved into my chest. It's now out of my stomach. I'm going to put myself into, my sympathetic, and I'm going to get into fight and flight, and I'm going to feel all this anxiety, and now I can't concentrate. I'm not as effective at work. Okay. Just even that notion of, can I stay in my nose, in and out through my nose, unless I'm sprinting? Can I try to draw my breath down into my stomach? And can I, do all of this? Could I get my exhales when I'm at work down to about 7 seconds so that I stay in my parasympathetic involuntarily, right? Not like, I got to calm down. That's not really effective, right? Because then they're stressed. It's like my friends, I always say, have the feeling, don't have the feeling about the feeling. It's like, how do I take some of the thought? We have so much thought going on out of it. So to your point, the breath is such a powerful tool, especially in this day and age of distraction. And if people really could find the time, like using a headspace or meditation or something, and everyone can do it, and if you're task oriented, you have to keep your mind busy. You can breathe with reps, you can breathe with time. So your mind is actually occupied with sort of, I'm going on this journey. And it's effective. And listen, the science, we know this from all the TM guys and everybody, the science on the impact of how it positively impacts your brain, it's off the charts. Mm-hmm. This isn't some feel good, la la, woo woo, sprout eating hippie in a corner. There's real science and data. So it's for everybody, whether you're a VC guy or a Wall Street person, on the East Coast, it's for everybody. For sure.
It's interesting that it has never come about in terms of, like it's just now becoming something that people talk about in terms of their well-being. And yet the breath is the foundation for life. I mean, more so than you could say the sun maybe is more, I don't know. There's not much more than the breath, because you can survive for maybe 3 minutes without air, unless you're trained, you can probably survive longer. I think I saw, there are a few magicians that have survived for, like 15 or 20 minutes, but God love them.
that's slowing the heart rate down, and also understanding how to oxygenate the system beforehand.
Yep.
So that the brain is taken care of. But, I think the thing is that, it's like anytime we get industrialized in any way, it's like, hey, this is working and progress is happening and all this growth, and this is so cool, and our lives are made easier, and it's so, there's less friction in our day-to-day living, and my food, I can get that easier, I sleep, all this stuff. And then we always get to a point where we go, whether it's too far or we have to adjust to the new place that we are. And so I think we got far enough away from breathing. I think we live stressful enough lives. I think we have enough distractions that the people that have been saying this their whole lives, whether it's pranayama or all kinds of, apnea breathing, their voice is being heard, because whether it's intuitive or subconscious or whatever, enough people are going to say, wait a second, I'm getting off kilter. I need some tools. And so finally we can hear those voices of people who have been saying that for a really long time. I always joke about, like, now we eat organic. Now we have broths. It's like, this is old stuff. And now we're sort of going, hey, we've gotten so far from some of these back to those fundamentals. We've got to revisit it, reframe it, make it really important, market it, do some crazy stuff around it. and try to bring it into the modern day, because it's a tool people really need and children really need.
How do you incorporate breathing and or meditation? You said you're not so great at it, but I would imagine that you do it. Am I wrong in that assumption?
No, I call it active meditation though. Like, I'm a person who I'm not completely in touch with all my feelings all the time, but I try to, take my temperature a few times a day and go, wow, okay. Your mind's pretty busy, and you're reacting and responding either out of fear or ego, or something's going on. And so let's say I don't have time to breathe, but you can bet if I'm going from A to B in my car, I will be doing more dynamic breathing and diaphragmic breathing, because I understand that I'm not able to get there on my own. I'm not able to talk myself, off that ledge. And so I use the breath. So I will do it post recovery to recover from, post training to recover, because the best way you can start your recovery process for your tissue and your cells is by oxygenating the system right after training. So I'll use it there, and then I'll just use it throughout my day. I'll notice if I'm sitting at my desk, hey, my mouth is closed, and I'm using, and my spine and everything's activated. I'm not leaning against my chair, and I'm breathing deep into my diaphragm, because it's bad enough that I'm sitting. Right. So what's the thing I can do right in that moment? Realistically, I don't have to go anywhere. It doesn't cost me anything. It doesn't take extra time out of my day to at least stay in that deep, diaphragmic breath with the nose in and out, because that is the only way, right? With CO2 rising in our system, that's the only way we can absorb the oxygen. So when you see someone mouth breathing, it's like we always talk about boxers, for example. A boxing coach from the 50s would have told his fighter when they went out, your opponent is mouth breathing. He's done.
Right.
He's finished. They knew that. They've known that. It's all about nose breathing. I'm sure you've talked about it, but the oxygen advantage for those that are science geeks and they need the data.
I had Patrick on the podcast about a year ago.
So they already know. So
look, different people are listening now than listened a year ago. So,
the great
they need to know.
Is it's like, oh, big deal. But it's like, no, it's just a simple science. If you don't have CO2 present, which is uncomfortable, right? Mouth is easier. It's 3 times bigger, more air than through the nasal passageway. However, it's not the most effective or efficient way to breathe, because what Patrick will talk about is that there's a part of your brain that's actually sort of spying on your breathing, if you will. And if we're chest breathing, it creates anxiety. And so if you're at work and you're trying to concentrate, but you've got mental anxiety, now you're impacting how effective you are. So if nothing else, it's like telling people like, okay, you'll make more money or you'll have more sex if you nose breathe. Great. Whatever it takes to get them to understand that most of us are breathing incorrectly. And it's not about breathing more. It's just about breathing more efficiently. So down into the nose, they could say, you'll hear a lot of people say, well, one of my nostrils doesn't work, and it'll get better.
Right.
That's the other thing. Right. Moisture will build up between the nasal passageways in the lungs. I actually experienced something when I rigorously pursued nasal breathing. Weirdly, I had a cauterized nostril when I was a small kid, because I would have these really big nosebleeds. And for 10 days to 2 weeks, when I started really doing big sets of nasal breathing, my nose would bleed every night in the shower. And I think it either cleared or opened up this nasal passageway. So it's a little bit like stretching or training, where in the beginning you go, I can't get good air. It's like, and you will.
Right.
You'll get there. And also what happens too is even the muscles and the fascial tissue around the ribs will start to soften and expand, almost like being warmed up for a run. So once we start to do that and really know how to open up the ribs with the breath, front and back and side to side, I always say. And in the beginning, it's probably easier if people lay down, taking gravity off the head and, even getting the diaphragm kind of flat versus it's getting pushed down.
Because when you're laying down flat, you can feel the rib cage moving through you can almost feel your diaphragm moving, like you get that feedback that you don't get when you're standing up.
totally can. And I think what I always tell people, hey, if you want to practice, it's really simple. Lay on the floor, take your index finger, put it below your belly button. Okay. And because nobody breathes, most people don't breathe intuitively down into the stomach. So the stomach expands. And women, very muscular or fit people or type A'ers hold their stomach.
Right.
Women are told, hold your stomach flat, right?
Right.
So you lay flat, you get, the beer gut. And if you can't do it through the breath, what you do is just inhale and pop your stomach out. So then all of a sudden you start to, you can connect a pathway that eventually you can do. But this way you kind of force it. So you put your index finger there below the belly button, you inhale, the lower belly pops out. And on the short breath, just draw the belly button, drop it back to the spine. So it's really an abbreviated breath. It's just really quick. Then once you do 10 or 15 of that, because by the way, it takes work. What I say to people is they can use a color in their mind, to visualize with the breath so they can see it internally. Inhale, the stomach pops out. They visualize this colored ball. Then they use the spine to pull the ball up to the ribs. The ribs open up to the ceiling. And then there's a third part of the breath, though, that it basically goes up to the upper back and lats. So you would almost feel like the lats can peek around. That's how much opening and stretching. So it's 3 parts of the breath. It's into the stomach and the diaphragm, the ribs lifting up, that ball opening up that ribs, then the ball floating up using the spine. Because if you only use the front line of your body, so the stomach and chest, you can't actually pull it up into the upper back and lats and ribs. You can't really pull it in the back. And what will happen is as people become kind of more connected to this breath, I always say you almost feel like you can lift yourself off the floor with your ribs at the back, but that's how big the breath gets at the third part. And then you bring the belly button to the spine so the waist stays long on the exhale. We don't want to, we're always trying to stay in expansion because we're already, folded over. Right. So how do I expand it? Even in the exhale, belly button comes to spine, it starts over. And what people don't realize is it's kind of work. We think of like meditation as a slowdown. When you're oxygenating the system and opening up the ribs, there's a level of work. So I always invite people like, hey, 10 reps, 20 reps, then just do slow breathing, or that's when they can involve breath holding to, take advantage of. So when you hold your breath, your CO2 rises, and that's when all the oxygen gets absorbed into the cells and tissue. But if not, just do 3 sets of 20 and feel what that feels like. And also what you'll see is the ribs will start to open up and make room for the lungs, and the breath becomes more effortless.
Right.
It's just literally like, oh, I'm warmed up. Now I can move it, it's getting all that tuned up. And if, you have a big meeting, or, you're about to meet with somebody that really stresses you out, an ex-partner in work or in life, run into the bathroom stall and take 10 really deep breaths. And all of a sudden you just, again, get that distance, that perspective, and also maybe the opportunity to use a different filter. And besides all the health benefits, it goes on and on about the organs and, cell health and all these things. There's just so many positive things to breathing. And like you said, on some level, it's an essence of life. Yeah. So it's a tool.
I love how you described the 3 phases of the breath. I actually found myself doing it while you were describing it. And it was really cool. Like I've never really experienced the notion of my lats peeking around like a ball of air in my chest and abdominal cavity. And it was really cool. Like I actually felt different. I felt taller. I felt bigger. I felt like I expanded. And I'm just sitting here on my ass on a stool. Yeah. I'm not even really doing it, quote unquote. I am doing it, but I'm not really,
I'm the householder person. I live with, Laird is uber high performance, and I in my own ways try to be high performance. But for example, like I teach a class in Kauai 3 days a week. It's probably like 70 or 80 people. It's my $1 class. And at the end of the class, we do breathing. And my whole hope.
Is it like a fitness class or what kind of a class?
Yeah, it's sort of, I change it each time, but it's a HIIT class, but you're on a team with like 4 to 6 people, and you're following another team. And, there's a lot of things built into that are great, because if I'll show up for you if I don't feel like showing up for myself. Right. It also creates diverse groups. So your team reflects you more than the room. So right. I have 70-year-old women, and I have, very athletic, beefy 35-year-old men, but they're protected by their team, if you will.
Yep.
There's just a lot of good dynamics. However, the breathing, we do it after for about 15 minutes. And my whole thing is I want to get really good at, if I can teach or share at a way that we call it the householder. Because the advanced people, they'll get it. And there's also really advanced people to teach it. And the stuff that excites me is when I get somebody who has never done breathing, never considered breathing. They are sort of what like I said, they call the householder. And they go, wow, I really felt something.
What do you mean by householder? I keep thinking you're about to explain it, and then you haven't explained it. Like what does that mean? A householder
is just like an everyday person, not like a professional athlete.
Oh, gotcha. Not
somebody who does triathletes in their spare, triathlons in their spare time.
Right.
Those people who, man, they're just making it. Like they've got work and they are trying to pay the bills, and they're, it's like, these are the people that I want to say, hey, can I explain this in a way that they're barely interested. They're already, maybe they're even reluctant. How can I get it to them in a way where they feel it so it becomes intuitive, and they go, wow, okay, I kind of felt something. And you go, okay, good.
Right. Right. That's perfect.
I don't, a guy like, I could bring a military guy here or a female athlete, and they want to.
Yes. Yeah.
So you can go, hey, and then the mitochondria does this, and then, this is what happens in the, in the cell, and they'll go, oh, fascinating. The householder's like, okay, you're killing me with this. So I think for me, that is also what I'm really interested in, the communication, because if we're here as a collective and the majority of people running around are really dealing with so many things, how do we get it to them quick? How do we support them and make it realistic to the amount of time or resources or whatever that they have?
Right. One thing we haven't talked at all about yet is hot and cold, and ice and super hot saunas, and how do you plug that in to this whole equation?
Well, so I mentioned earlier about Laird using his recovery. So let's say, for example, Laird surfs a long day, and maybe he's feeling fatigued in a deeper way. He'll use the heat only. He'll do a couple rounds of heat as a recovery. If you read always about the Chinese, it's always about warmth, heat.
Yep.
And, as we go, you start to go, okay, there really is something to that. And the benefits to your brain and all-cause mortality, and, just it goes on and on. Now, cold.
How hot, when you say heat, how hot are we talking, and does the form of heat matter?
Well, okay, that's a great question. So if you're coupling it with ice, and because you don't have hours and hours, we use dry heat. We have a barrel sauna. It goes about 210 to 220 hot.
That's hot. Yeah.
So after about 15 minutes, you're like, yo, I'm almost, but not fully looking forward to that ice. Now, if you said to me in a perfect world, 156 to 175 infrared LED lights, yeah. Mm-hmm. Great. If you've got because Laird, like my endurance and Laird endurance, we're 30 and 45 minutes sitting in one of those saunas.
Right.
But that's a deep detox. The health benefits there are another thing. But so for me, it's partnering, and that's dry also. Steam I like for obvious reasons, but I don't want to sit in steam every day. Like for me, it's all about dry heat. Mm-hmm. Is with the ice, dry sauna, because it's like time efficient. It's like, boom, 12, 15 minutes, I'm hotter, then I'll get out, I'm ready to get into the ice. If you're talking about a real recovery, any kind of heat, and if for me, the sharp end of the stick is the infrared, because it's that deep, it's organs, it's all, it's a detox on another level, but that takes time.
Right.
So that's just a different animal. So the way we incorporate it is, in summer, when we do pool, we incorporate heat and ice because it's outside, we're already kind of rolling. But in a perfect world, I would say to people, if you only had time for one thing, it would be any kind of heat that you could get your hands on. Now, if you said, hey, I'm
like a hot shower, like taking a hot shower, is that the kind of heat you're talking about?
I would say it's the same. I think it's about getting the body to sweat.
Right.
And sort of all of those hormonal and, like I said, there's a lot of brain health. There's a lot. Dr. Rhonda Patrick talks a lot about,
she does.
Alzheimer's and, how for men, if they can do it 3 times a week, it drops their possibility of Alzheimer's by some drastic percentage. So heat, that's what I would say to people is the number one. Now, if they wanted to explore heat and ice, this is a really, or cold, let's say, let's not even call it ice. Let's say cold. I think this is really powerful because if you have an injury and you take ice and you put it directly on the injury, that's actually not great for you unless it's pain management versus like I'm going to take an opioid.
Right.
So I've said to people, you have an injury. If you don't need the ice, the inflammation, all the healing hormones that go there, what is it, IGHF-1 and stuff like this, this is all stuff that benefits you. Now, if you say to me, hey, I'm in so much pain I can get no rest, or I'm considering taking a painkiller, great, ice it.
Ice it, right. Right.
Now, that's different than submerging yourself in ice, right? Yes. So submerging yourself, you have all kinds of benefits, hormone regulation. I always say it's like, any piss and vinegar you have is gone once you're in the ice because mood regulating, because you're all of a sudden now you're surviving.
Right.
Your body's like, now I'm threatened. And it's amazing how clear we get when we're threatened. And so if it's nothing else other than putting something that's safe and healthy discomfort in your life that you've got to overcome, for me, that's what training really is, besides obviously putting stress on my system. It's I'm uncomfortable. I'm putting myself here. I'm emotionally managing this. Mm-hmm. I think also the ice provides that opportunity where you're like, I want to get out. And I'm gonna sit here and breathe my way through this and override this impulse. Because also, if you can practice, we have all these impulses as people walking around every day. How do I manage all these impulses? And the ice is also a way to express that. So heat and cold is amazing. And then another thing, especially for people who live in places where they actually have cold water coming out of their shower head, is if you could end each shower each day, 30 seconds of cold, especially for men, you boost your testosterone. It does even for, women. It helps with your hormone regulation. And also, I hate to say it, even like your skin and things like that, it has all these benefits. So, Wim Hof will defer to the cold as a noble force. And I think that is very true. Nobody goes, I can't wait to get in the ice. I don't care who you are. Right. I don't care how good you are at it. Laird can stay under for 3 minutes. Nobody is like hopping and skipping towards the ice tub. Right. So if you feel that, just know it's completely natural. But these are the opportunities. I'm uncomfortable. I don't really want to do this. And I'm still going to find the way to manage myself to accomplish it. These are things that I think as human beings, when we can do that, it gives us a lot of power.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I was just thinking when you were saying that, that really goes to, just to bring the conversation full circle, that goes to the practice of all the things that suck in life about living a great life. I mean, like you look at Laird, you look him drop into a 40-foot wave, and you're like, wow, it'd be nice to be Laird Hamilton if you're a surfer. If you're not a surfer, maybe not. But the work that goes in, and the ice is like a microcosm of what you're talking about. It just shrinks it all down into 2 minutes of, can I be calm in the face of the thing that I don't like? And I'm never gonna like it. I mean, I don't care how many cold showers I've taken. I never look forward to turning the cold water on, ever.
No. And
you think you'd get better at it. I mean, my brain keeps telling me, oh, you're going to get used to this. You're going to get used to this. I never get used to it. No. Jesus.
We have to fill our vehicles with gas. Dinners have to get made. Laundry has to get done. Work. It's like life is a constant element of this. So also, I think somehow when we can get better, we put ourselves in these exaggerated environments like the ice because we don't live like that anymore, right? We're very comfortable all the time.
Way too comfortable. Yeah.
These are opportunities also for us to know ourselves and to to also respect ourselves, because you go, man, today I really didn't want to do it, and I found the way. I think that it's more about that for me than, yes, I'm very well aware of the health benefits, and that's maybe what got me started. But as you do it, it's like, and I don't mean like, I'm going to take a hammer and I'm going to smash my hand because it's uncomfortable.
Right.
I'm not talking about things that are destructive.
Right.
I'm saying, are there these things out there that will support us either emotionally or mentally or spiritually or physically or all? And can I subject myself to this and expand and learn something about myself? And also at some level deal with something that's really uncomfortable and find a way, because I think that's a muscle too. So I think when we flex that, so when we're going through our day-to-day life and you're like, ask me, I mean, if I never had to step foot into another grocery store or make another dinner. And I remember at one point, I think I was against making school lunches. I was just like, I hate school lunches. These are the things where you're like, I don't need to engage and make this such a big deal. Like, I understand this has to get done. It's going to get done.
Right.
And I spare myself all this emotion, and which makes me tired and makes me unpleasant. It's like, yeah, okay, got it. This is what's happening. And the ice is, you get it straight quick. You do. And so, I think almost everything has to correlate to something that would support us in everyday living. Because if it was just about exercising and eating healthy, it's probably not a good enough reason.
Yeah, I think, extracting the lessons from these things becomes, because I don't think I've really, it's just been about a year for me where I've actually started to look at why am I doing 100 burpees first thing in the morning? Like, what is it that I can learn about the rest of my life, kind of like what we're talking about, that I have gained from putting myself through things that are uncomfortable. And I think you can easily just go through life and do these things. Like, you're physically capable, you can go you have the fortitude to do those things. But if you don't take the time to let those experiences kind of integrate and then think about, okay, how can this apply to my relationship with my wife? How can this apply to my relationship with my kids? How can I use this in my business? And how does this lesson of the ice translate to my business? And I think that actually takes, pulling out of this frenzied high speed world and thinking and giving yourself the space to do that. And, because you can easily, I've done it. I've done for 15 years. I've been doing 25 years. I've been doing stuff and not really thinking about how to take those and apply them to other parts of my life.
Well, and that's everything with consciousness or an intention, right? It's like you can drink the elixir with all the turmeric and the ginger and all that, but if you just don't take that 1 second to go, hey, I'm going to do this for myself. I'm going to be grateful for it, and connect with these ideas, because that's the other thing, right? We can be doing all this healthful stuff. To your point, 100 burpees in the morning, but if we sort of still don't sprinkle in a little bit of the consciousness, I think it's hard. Now, I will say this though: there are parts of life that sometimes we have to get done, and I almost feel like protecting yourself from them is also a good thing. So you could be heading into a task, okay, let's say I know I'm going to go on to the 405 in Los Angeles, and it's at 3:30 on a Thursday.
Oh God help you.
I already know what's about to happen.
Right.
And so it's not about not driving with consciousness. It's about me protecting myself and making a decision prior. Okay, I'm going to be sitting in traffic. This is not going to be fun. I'm not going to go down this path. I'm not going to react to it. I know it's uncomfortable. So, what am I going to do? Okay, I'll find a cool podcast and or I'll do these other things. So I think sometimes it's weird. It's like, how do we become hyper conscious and like really in that moment? And then how do we find the way to go, okay, I understand what I'm about to do, and it's cool. But I'm going to back up. I'm going to take my real self, my inner self, and back her up and protect her, and put this other self that can manage this and also will keep their cool. And I've pre-decided, right? Like somebody cuts me off, and it's like, I knew this was all going to happen.
Right.
So I think there's a time to move in and move back.
It's almost like preloading acceptance. You know, not waiting for the moment to happen. You're like, okay, I'm accepting what's about to occur, and it's going to be the way it's going to be, and I accept it for what it is.
Because only really masterful people, and I keep hoping one day to get there, don't have to preload totally acceptance, right? Like it's happened, and then somehow in that moment they're like, oh, I'm not going to even react. I got it. I'm like, oh, if I could do that.
Yes, that's like the mother load.
I'm still the amateur preloading my acceptance.
Right.
And some, like, even some scenarios, like I have a daughter right now, my middle, she's 15, right? And I've preloaded certain responses before we have conversations because I know it's probably, it's just more productive, right? Like, it sounds silly, but it's like, and within that, I have a big, I have a big area I can travel, so I can move in. I give myself the wiggle room. Like if she's in a certain mood, I can move in closer. If she's in another mood, I know how to give her space and, sort of move in and out of that. So sometimes I think it's using your experience in life and saying, okay, what would be the most effective way, not only for myself, but also for this circumstance and this particular individual to come, what should I come with?
Right.
And sometimes you hit it and sometimes you don't. And, you're still in the 4 or 5.
And you learn from that and you modify it and you hopefully come back the next time.
And you laugh at yourself. Like you're like, oh, I'm surprised there's traffic and you're agitated and So I don't know. I think that's sort of some stuff that I've learned to do, but my physical training and the idea of eating well is to support the possibility of even being able to approach it that way. Because if I'm not feeling good, or I'm hopped up on sugar, or crashing off of caffeine, or whatever the thing I'm doing, or I don't feel good, I can't even get outside of my own discomfort or pain or irritation or frustration enough to think about how do I want it to be.
You just mentioned a word that I definitely wanted to ask you about, with caffeine, because I got a box of Laird superfood sent to me when we missed the pod. Thank you so much. I don't know who sent it to me, but one of your people or you sent it, and it was awesome because but now it's not so awesome because I've had to actually abstain now. I'm off coffee I've gone for a week. Because I've been drinking literally that whole tumbler that you sent. I don't know how many ounces, like 30 ounces or something. It's humongous. Drink the whole thing every day of coffee with one of the superfood, not the turmeric one. That's not my favorite one, but the original. And just way too good. Like it's how do you deal with that? It's crazy.
I don't not do it. Laird. So Laird is a really thoughtful person, and every morning I wake up, he gets up quite a bit earlier than I do, at least an hour, sometimes more. And in the kitchen will be a mug, and in the mug, sitting there, is all the ingredients loaded up, and all I have to do is put it under the coffee maker and hit the double espresso button. So. I didn't start drinking coffee until I was in my mid-40s when we really got involved in this business. I joke that, for years and years, we had coffee beans flown wherever we were. Laird has had a deep relationship with coffee, and Paul Check 17 years ago was giving ghee to Laird in his coffee, and those two lunatics would be like getting jacked up underneath the gym, and I could hear them. And I had
Paul on. Yeah, I had Paul on about 2 months ago, and he was one of my first teachers in the health and fitness world. So Paul is a complete nut. He's a complete nut. Yes.
That energy, those two.
Oh my God.
And I would just be like, why do I have to train with them right now?
Right.
And now they're jacked up on caffeine and ghee. So Laird's had this real fascination, and I always said once you figured out how he uses his coffee for his performance, it was a whole other world. And then he was doing that for his friends for years and years. And then we have a good friend who was running another business of ours, and he thought, how hard can that be? And he put together samples, and before you knew it, Laird Superfood came around. And for me, I really like it because I can go till 12 or 1 because of the fat and the caffeine.
Yeah, right.
And it makes me feel good, and yeah, it's a thing at our house.
Oh, it's a thing. It's definitely a thing.
Now, I will tell you this secret: if I sent you InstaFuel, the way to have the turmeric is 1 scoop of the turmeric in the InstaFuel for non-turmeric-y people.
Oh.
It's off the charts. So the InstaFuel is the one you just add the hot water.
Yeah, right.
And it has coffee and creamer.
I don't think I've tried that one because I make my own. I always make my own coffee, so I haven't tried that one.
Oh, that's crazy! You have to try it.
Okay.
And add 1 scoop of the turmeric, and then make sure you emulsify it.
Yep.
You can't believe how good that one is.
When you say emulsify it, what do you mean? Like, can I use a little aerator, or do you need a? Yeah.
The spoon. It
doesn't do it. No.
It needs a little more love than the spoon.
Right.
But I'm telling you, that's the way to do it.
Okay.
And all the coffee's organic, high altitude, low acidic, so it won't break up your stomach. And if you do go back to coffee.
Oh, I will. I definitely going back to coffee, but it's I haven't tried putting it in my tea. I should try the superfood in my tea.
I have a friend who when he comes over, we make him green tea and put the original creamer in, because yak butter tea and all the the food, we're all doing that. So yeah,
I was doing that. It's been like every 2 years I take a hiatus from coffee, and 2 years ago when I tried it, I was making my version of yak butter tea. I would put coconut oil and ghee and blend it all up and put it in with I don't know what kind of tea I was using. Might have been some kind of loose leaf like black tea or. I was
gonna say a black tea sounds like it might be nice with that.
Yeah. Hopefully this is not a long departure from coffee for me because I love coffee. So
I didn't forever and ever, and then Laird's like, try this, try that, try this, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good.
It's pretty good.
I wasn't a big coffee taste person. So now he's like, let's be clear, what you're drinking is like, because he puts the cacao creamer and the regular creamer, and in the morning he'll even add real coconut oil and do a full Monty, so that'll take you through.
What else does he put in there?
Red palm.
What is that?
It has a lot of vitamins, and the good thing about this one is there's a brand called Nutiva. I don't work with them. I just am sharing if I was sharing with like a friend.
Yep.
And they kind of have a really socially responsible program, how they get it farmed. And it's in South America, so there's no animals. Like people go, what about the orangutans? I go, well, there's no orangutans in South America. And their flavor profile on their red palm, you just add a little bit. So it'll be coconut red palm. And then for certain people, they like ghee. Laird likes whole raw butter, unpasteurized. Yeah. And then he'll flavor it up with different. So that'll be like the go to 5-6 hours one. That's the meal coffee.
Yeah, right. Right.
Oh, it's no joke. But let me tell you,
it's amazing how much of that other stuff you can put in it, and it just like you don't have to hold back.
I put mushroom powder in my coffee too.
Oh, I haven't tried that.
We make a mushroom powder with 4 mushrooms with lion's mane, cordyceps, maitake, and chaga. And all it does is it sort of malts it up. It doesn't impact the flavor profile at all. So then I go, okay, and now I've also had some mushroom powder.
Right. Yeah, no, it's a full-on meal. It's a full-on meal, like boom.
For sure.
Gabby, thank you so much for spending this time with me. This has been just a really easy conversation, and I really appreciate your time and what you're doing in the world. I don't
know what I'm doing in the world.
I know what you're doing.
I say this. I say that, we can just all do our best each day. And, I remember when I was a lot younger, because I have a tendency, one could say I have sort of rougher edges, if you will. And I used to think, I would see women that were really loving and nurturing, and they'd be like, oh, okay, and really soft and sweet. And I thought, I must not be loving, or I must not be nurturing because I don't act like that. Mm-hmm. And what was a great, important lesson for me is I am very loving and I am very nurturing, but I just do it with my own language.
Right.
And so sometimes we see other people doing things or contributing, and you say, well, maybe I can't do that because I don't speak that language. And the fact of the matter is, we all certainly can, as long as we're comfortable with knowing that we might just have a different language. So I would hope that no one would allow that to prevent that from putting it out into the world, And I mean, it's the same with like certain guys, like what's his name, David Goggins right now, like his book, it's like
David Goggins, yeah.
Yeah, don't give up, don't quit. That is a very specific language.
That is a very specific, and a lot of people it's not going to hit with,
No, but if you really peel the language back, it's still in love.
Absolutely.
Right? It's still an empowerment. It's still, and so that for me has been a really important thing to learn. And I would hope, that other people at least thought about that and went like, okay, I'm comfortable. Like I'm who I am and I'm still going to contribute whatever that is. But first, before we can do that, we really do have to find the ways to take care of ourselves. We just have to, and we live in a really easy world and we live in a really tough world. And I think that's what's confusing because it's so easy.
It's tough because it's easy.
And it's so tough.
Yeah.
And so it's getting them to go, all right, I understand that. And even like one thing I appreciate about Laird is I can have any feeling in the world, even if I'm not right. And I'll say, I'm feeling this. And he'll go, huh. And then you realize it's okay to feel how we feel. But what do we want to do?
Right. That's beautiful. That's a beautiful, that's just, what does that mean? Huh? Who knows? Who knows? Doesn't matter.
Or he'd say to me things like, seems pretty normal. Like because he's still a wild animal.
Yeah.
So he's connected to things so freely that he's like, is that a big deal?
Right.
And so I really appreciate that because it's given me the confidence to accept that too. And I would say, let's not spend a ton of time giving each other a hard time or, criticizing each other or anything. I think the more time we have to put that into something powerful for ourselves or the people close to us, it has pretty good impact.
Yeah. I like to use the word open the valve. Like for me, like open the valve to my heart and let whatever's going to come out. It's been a long journey for me to learn what that means, to let who I am come out and express itself the way I'm going to express it, not the way you might express it or the way Laird's going to express it or the way my wife's going to express it or anybody else. It's mine. And accepting that and letting that happen and opening that valve is it's powerful. It's incredibly powerful.
Well, yeah, and then we don't have to worry about hiding.
Right.
And I think also who can protect us and we'll take care of that. They'll be around and you'll know pretty quickly maybe who I call it the rings of closeness. It's like we're in the center and the people who can really always protect us most times they're in that inner, and you have that kind of relationship where you can even have like, discussions or arguments and you can work it out.
Yeah.
And then you have the next ring set of people who are on the outside of that who like you're close and it's friendship and it's deep, but maybe, not everything. And then, you have a few sets of those rings. And so you also know people's capacity, that chemistry part I was talking about, because we all certain languages. And then I think the more we can develop, like you said, our own voice and our own contribution and things like that, then life starts feeling like, okay, there's so many things I don't understand about what we're doing here, but this feels pretty good.
Right. Well, thanks again. How can people find you? Like where I know you're on Instagram. If they have questions or want to reach out, like how do they find you?
Well, xptlife.com is the fitness side of things, and we have someone there manning that, but I do get notes and emails to me directly.
Okay.
We're very good at, Laird and I feel really strongly about we're here, I mean, I don't want you coming to my house unannounced, but
right.
If you want to send me a note, and I've called people before, that's, we're all humans. And my Instagram is Gabby Reece Reece is Reece. But yeah, I don't think those two places are pretty good.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, and have a great winter. Continuing and great life. Yeah. This has been really great to get to know you a little bit better.
We'll see you again. Okay. Aloha.
Hey, it's Andy, and thanks so much for listening. If you want to know more about what I'm learning each month, head over to andypetronic.com and subscribe to my monthly newsletter. If you were touched, moved, or inspired by anything you heard today, chances are someone else you know would be too. Please take a moment to think about who and send them a link to this episode. And if you're super stoked, please head over to iTunes to write a review. The best way to keep current on guests and episodes is to subscribe so that the latest one will automatically get delivered straight to your phone. The apps I use for this are Apple Podcasts, Overcast, or Pocket Casts. The Andy Petronic podcast is produced by our team, Winslow Jenkins, Becca Borowski, and Ernie Hurtado. Big thanks to Nikki Grudidaria for the artwork. You can find all of our episodes, links, and complete show notes at wholelifechallenge.com/podcast. I'm Andy Petronic. Thanks for listening.